All right. Yeah, thank you so much for being here and for this opportunity to share about research that I've been working on. This is part of a larger project. I can talk about the larger project. It's a book about the spectatorial position that media collaborations can create for folks to look at media from the position of a conspirator. So, not just a viewer, not just a witness, not just an audience, but someone who's conspiring against the system along with incarcerated and non-incarcerated media makers. But this particular project is titled "How You Call Yourself a Woman," and it's exploring how it becomes possible to address gender and sexuality and gender and sexual based harm in prison abolitionist media production. And it's a work in progress. So again, I welcome thoughts and suggestions, questions, etc. So the context for this research project is the album that Noam and I are making along with a bunch of collaborators, both inside and outside. This is an album of original hip hop music, and most of the musicians are incarcerated or have been incarcerated in Broward County, Florida, although there's a few who are connections through our networks who have different stories. And what I found during the process of working on the album is that it became possible to have somewhat transformative conversations about gender-based violence. And I'm going to argue that that is something that has a significant promise to support abolitionist organizing. And with abolitionist organizing, being able to confront forms of harm outside of a punitive carceral system, is really crucial. And in a moment, I'll explain why I found the album to be such an important way to study this issue. But I also just want to kind of locate myself. Many of you know me, but I want to just name I'm a white genderqueer person. I'm a filmmaker and media theorist and an abolitionist. And I came into abolitionist organizing about 10 years ago in Chicago through the group Black and Pink. And I'm myself minimally system impacted. I know that my class and race privileges have resulted in a relationship to the system that's very different from a lot of the people that I work with. But also, I want to name that none of us is not system impacted in a prison culture. And I think it's important for us to think about, what it is that what's our stake in the game, whether someone has been, incarcerated, whether your family has been incarcerated, or whether you are, like me, minimally system impacted, but have in ways been shaped by the fact that we have this culture that depends upon disposing of people. So that's what brings me to the work and who I am. And as you can all see, like I try to present often as very queer, but I sound very feminine. And so that's another thing that shapes my interaction with the project is how I'm perceived and how I sound to people who I'm working with. And the other context for the project is the Community Hotline for Incarcerated People, which is the grassroots organization that the album sort of emerged from. And Noam and I are on the steering committee. The hotline started in April 2020 as a way of gathering information about COVID in the local jails. And since then, we've collected information about medical neglect and documented a range of other problems in the jail. And throughout that time, people kept sharing music. So it was Noam who started thinking, could we turn these, little bits of music, these tracks and hooks that people were sharing over the phone after they documented something like medical neglect, can we turn that into an album? So that became this project, Bending the Bars. And just for another kind of context, Broward County Jails is the other piece of context for this project. Most of the people who are involved in the album have a connection to Broward County Jails. The jail has a reputation of being one of the worst jails in the country. The ACLU has had pending litigation for 25 years and says the conditions are just always unconstitutional. And communication is really cut off. People can, of course, make high-priced phone calls, but all mail has been restricted to postcards only, both incoming and outgoing. So even simple things like trying to get someone's lyrics, they can't send a full letter with their lyrics, nor can we send in a letter with what we think are their lyrics to get it corrected. The restriction on communication is very severe. And for this project, we decided that we weren't going to try to collaborate with the jail. A lot of albums of music by incarcerated people are made through collaborations, and that's very necessary in some cases and can really produce, results that are very important. In our case, I think for one, we weren't necessarily set up to do that because we didn't have a positive relationship with the jail because we were documenting their abuse of power and medical neglect. And for two, what we wanted to do was make the album in a way that allowed us to learn more about the system. And for my own research, that's also been really powerful because by making the album without relying on any kind of special access or special privileges, we learn a lot about what it takes to organize, to free people, to defend people, to protect people, because we're not in a kind of special or privileged position. So I want to be clear, I think both ways of pursuing music collaborations with incarcerated people are valuable. And in this case, we didn't have any approval from the institution. That also meant we sometimes were cut off from communicating for weeks, months, depending upon what was going on. So we started the album project. The word got out. People were hearing that we were collecting demos, and we collected about 50 demos. We ended up with our third executive producer. So Noam and I are the EP team along with Gary Fields, who you see here. Gary was in Broward County Jail and was an organizer there. And unfortunately, he is now incarcerated in Florida Department of Corrections and can't be here for this call. But he recruited a lot of our artists and did an incredible job just kind of visioning the album, getting people on board, connecting us with people on the outside who were beat makers and producers. So yeah, shout out to Gary and much gratitude. So for this particular piece of my research, what I'm looking at is the ways that the album project helps organizers face specific challenges that emerge in abolitionist organizing. And some of the challenges that are kind of persistent are the isolation of incarceration, the loss of loved ones, but then also some of the things that we're facing are persistent across abolitionist organizing outside of music organizing. So there's asymmetric relationships when you have incarcerated organizers and people who are not incarcerated. Someone who's incarcerated will often be much more isolated than people on the outside. So that creates power imbalances and also just emotional attachment imbalances, because someone like myself might be the main lifeline someone inside has to talk to, whereas I have the option of talking to all my friends and family easily without the burdens that people face. So things like friendships and crushes and harassment can also become a problem in inside-outside abolitionist partnerships. There's also the real problem of anti-Black racism. In our own organizing with CHIP, the majority of our organizers on the outside who are not incarcerated and who are minimally system impacted are white, and the majority of the organizers on the inside are Black. Many of the organizers on the outside are queer and trans, a lot of femmes. Most of the people on the inside are men. Most of them are cisgender and heterosexual. And so we've got these really distinct identities that we're trying to bridge. And again, I'm not trying to generalize. There's a range of people both on the inside and outside, but these are dynamics that recur actually in a lot of abolitionist organizing, these particular types of identity imbalances. And then the communication barriers. It's really hard to talk to people, to stay in touch, and that's by design. The jails and prisons are set up to limit people. And so then how do you organize in an inside-outside collaboration when communication is always so fraught? And specifically with abolitionist literature, a lot of the literature that's out there, so like academic literature, but also activist literature, is really interested in processes of accountability and repair and how do you navigate differences in identity and moments of harm. But much of the abolitionist literature is working with very specific groups of people, with criminalized survivors, with women and LGBTQ people, with political prisoners, and with feminists. So in some ways, what you could say is that a lot of abolitionist literature is looking at the proper abolitionist subject, someone who already is interested in abolition, someone who already is interested in gender equality, someone who's already thinking critically about race and racism. And what we ended up with in the album project was something different. We were working with people who are much more representative of the prison population as a whole, which, is Black men who are not necessarily already politicized in all the different ways that a proper abolitionist subject would be. And so in thinking about this album project, I think one of the things that for me makes it a resource for learning is that we have to be able to organize across significant differences of identity and experience if we're going to connect with people. And that means that we can't just like connect through our similarities. And I'm in the larger project, I'm drawing on Hilma Latino's concept of an infra-political ethics of care, which says that like we can care for people who we don't like and who we have complex and difficult relationships with. And I think that is something that, all too often abolitionist organizing doesn't really know how to deal with that. And on an anecdotal level, I see so many groups fall apart. People get mad at each other, people are hurt, there's a misunderstanding, and everything falls apart. So with the album, we had to keep working together because we had committed to this project and we had to figure out how to bridge some of these differences. So I'm going to talk very briefly now about two examples of how this led to kind of tough conversations that were valuable, and then open for questions. But for me, a big part of my experience with the album has been navigating gender. When I talk with folks on the phone, they usually read me as a woman, and that shapes how they interact with me. And it also shapes how I, read and respond to lyrics. And from the very beginning, we knew we wanted this to be an album that was consistent with our politics. So abolitionist, Black liberationist, LGBTQ inclusive, feminist, etc. I don't think we did a good job of explaining that to people. And that's something that maybe I would redo. But so often it was just so exciting to meet someone and be hearing their music that it wouldn't necessarily come out right at the beginning. So then later on, that's when we would realize, oh, there might be a kind of tension or a mismatch with some of the tracks that we were getting. So I'm going to talk about two of those, but I also just want to frame, first of all, that like incarceration itself is sexually violent. There are, incarceration is framed around single sex facilities, which of course doesn't encompass the whole range of gendered experience. Sexuality is policed, surveilled, restricted, but also sexual violence is routine, including through the ordinary operation of the facility. The remedies that are available, like the Prison Rape Elimination Act, are often ineffective or even cause more harm. And then when we are looking at inside-outside abolitionist partnerships, sexual violence impacts organizers on the inside and outside in so many different ways, including, again, the daily experience of sexual violence that is incarceration. And so this album project has highlighted some of these dynamics, but I think also given us a context for starting to talk about them in ways that we didn't have as an organization prior to the album project. So I'm going to talk about two conversations, and both of them, Noam kind of started off by alerting me to we've got some submissions that not sure if these are in line with, the album's values, what should we do? And in talking about these two, I'll be drawing on like text messages, recordings, my own notes, emails, just a set of records of my conversations with initially Noam, but then the incarcerated artists. And thanks, Noam, for being here. So I'll start with Irish, who is incarcerated in Broward County Jail. And initially, Noam reached out and gave me a heads up that Irish had recorded some demos that were like very intense and triggering. and had some problematic material. And I was really kind of surprised and curious. I'd spent a lot of time talking to Irish, just person to person, and documenting what he had experienced, especially um, his own experience of being misclassified and placed in max custody for months and months and months, and not being able to get himself reclassified after a violation of probation. So he had recorded these demos, and because we had all of our files somewhat organized, I could just go in and listen to them. So I'm listening to Irish's demos, and there were three of them. There was one called Ball Juice that was really, I mean, it just was full of explosive rage. And some of that rage was communicated by threats to rape corrections officers. Butterfucker was a song that was about kind of the sexual degradation of being incarcerated and just like shame and frustration and having your sexuality policed. And it was very intense. And Max Custody didn't have any kind of sexual content, but it did talk about Irish's experience of being medicated against his will. So these were really intense tracks, but also, you know, very expressive of the reality of what people are experiencing in the jail. And you can see here a postcard that Irish sent us, to document like all of the fees that he gets charged for the meds that he didn't want, that he was being forced to take. And so it made sense to me that he was using like a lot of metaphors of sexual violation to express his feelings of powerlessness. But of course, this is one of the things that feminists will interrogate and say, this is something we need to attend to and not just keep reproducing dynamics where powerlessness is coded as feminine and sexual violence is coded as power. So I wanted to talk to Irish about this, and we got on the phone, and I said, so I listened to your demos, and he immediately cut me off and he said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't want you to hear those." And then I felt really badly because I didn't want to listen to something without his permission. But I also said to him, like, "Oh, but you submitted them for the album." And he was like, "Yeah, but I didn't think that you would listen to them." And so then we had a conversation about like who he wanted to talk to with the tracks and just like how he was thinking about them. And that opened up the opportunity for me to say, there's some really great stuff in these songs, and there's also some stuff that I found really disturbing. And I talked to him about my concerns. We went back and forth. And, he heard me to the extent that like a couple of conversations can accomplish feminist consciousness raising. He got what I was trying to say about like, maybe the answer is not to sexually assault the nurses, but to imagine something else beyond just this kind of exchange of harm. They're harming him, so he harms them. And as we were talking, I asked him, if he would consider revising the tracks, and he said no. He just wrote to get them like out there, and he's done. So I asked him if he would allow me to kind of make a mashup and try to play with it and see if I could draw out something that, expressed what had come out of our conversation in terms of what he was feeling and what he was experiencing. So I did end up writing a track called Mindfucks that tries to explore, what it means to analogize his experience to assault, but not to then perpetuate sexually violent ideas. And I was able, after months, because he was cut off from communication for us for a long time, I ended up going to his court hearings and like asking to speak just to say, like, I've been trying to get in touch with him, and then eventually he was able to reconnect with us. And he liked the track, but it was too late for it to be on the album. So unfortunately, it didn't go forward. But it was an incredible opportunity to have really honest conversations, and it's grown our own friendship. And I feel incredibly privileged to have been able to have those conversations, to witness, his process, and also to hear him explain like why he wrote these songs, rather than to just see them as disturbing and move past them quickly, which again I sometimes see in abolitionist organizing. that these kind of hot or difficult moments, it can be tempting to just try to like move past them and avoid them. The second one, oh, sorry, that was just some incredible art we got from Morning Fox, who's doing the album art, but addresses the ways that the fees that are charged people are so abusive and harmful. The other one that I wanted to talk about today was from J4's We've Got to Break It. And again, this one started, the conversation about this one started when Noam kind of brought to my attention that there was this line in the track that said, why you call yourself a woman, you a slut bucket. And Noam and I talked, and neither of us really knew what slut bucket really meant, but it was like, maybe seems like something to ask some more questions about. Like, let's figure out what's going on here. So I reached out to J4 using the Securus email program that's available at the prison where he is. And I, asked him about the line, what did he mean by it, and told him a little bit about some of the books that I was reading at the time that were about the relationship between feminism and abolition, and asked him, if he would share more about what he was thinking. And I also, apologized for the fact that we hadn't necessarily provided a lot of information up front about our political values and acknowledged like, hey, if this is coming from nowhere, or like if this is coming from out of the blue, it's because we didn't prepare, but can we have this conversation now? And so his answer was that, he was trying to figure out like why women do the things they do as far as sluts go. And then he said, you can live how you want to as a female, but at the end of the day, to me, a woman should be married with one man doing what a woman does, good deeds, right back. And so here I am, a genderqueer person who, has as many partners as I want, so I could be considered a slut. And I was like, our worldviews are so different. We're so far apart. This is not to me what a good woman should be, like the emphasis on marriage, the emphasis on heterosexuality. All of this for me felt like we had a really big bridge to cross. But I thought like this was after my conversations with Irish, and I was like, all right, let's give it a try. So I asked if we could have a call. We scheduled the call, and we started talking. I got to share, how the line landed for me, and also ask, what he was talking about. And then something that was really surprising to me happened. And yeah, I think we have time for me to just actually play a little bit, and I think I just want to share some of the texture. I'm going to just start a new share. Great. Let me know if you can't hear this sound.
After speaking with you, it opened my mind up into, you know what I'm saying, as a female who'd been in life, been degraded, called certain things, how it made you feel at the time, or you see what I'm saying? Because as you text me, I know you understand.
So, we got to have a conversation. I got to be heard. He got to be heard. But then the thing that I was saying, was surprising was also part of this conversation. So I was talking to him about how we met him, which was through a mutual friend named LX. And he suddenly shared that he describes himself as gay now. He said, I've been gay for about a year. When I met LX, he was just telling me like, man, be yourself. You got 23 years in prison, just be yourself sometime. Don't worry about what the next person thinks. And I really didn't expect that this conversation was going to end up with him coming out to me. But because I had come out to him, talked about being queer, he wanted to know. And he was like, so what is the difference between queerness and bisexuality and being genderqueer? And I told him what I thought, and he was like really excited to learn about bisexuality because he had thought he had to choose between being straight or gay. And so the conversation became this conversation about, our lives and the experiences that we had had in different kinds of personal relationships. And again, if I had shut down when I saw that he had what seemed to be super normative ideas about gender and relationships, or if he had shut down when he got this email being like, "Hey, can we talk about feminism?" None of this would have been possible. So yeah, it became something that was really, I think, moving for both of us, for J4 and for me. And I'll just share briefly like what he said about what we're trying to accomplish with this conversation. And some of this will be incorporated into the album as sort of like a little interval between his track and the next song.
That's what's unique about it. I got to speak my mind about it, my visions, my heart about it, and you got to speak what you thought about it.
So yeah, in the end, I think my overall uh, lesson from this part of the album project and what I'm trying to explore in my research is the way that a media collaboration creates the space for these kinds of conversations. So the media collaboration creates that space because you have to, as it were, stay with the trouble, as the feminist theorist Donna Haraway says. Like, you can't just bounce or the album doesn't get made. And that, encourages and incentivizes everyone to keep working. You actually learn a lot about each other because you're dealing with creative expression. And through dealing with creative expression, you're going to have these moments where you find out about places where you see the world differently. And then you're building relationships and you're learning strategies, especially in our case where we had to keep figuring out how to stay in touch with people, so that you have a container for those conversations. And then again, in this case, where people were coming into the project, incarcerated musicians and organizers were coming into the project because of their relationship to hip hop, but not because of their relationship to politics. That meant that those of us on the outside, like myself, who know nothing about hip hop, have been able to learn a lot from the folks on the inside. And folks on the inside have been able to learn from us as well as we share some of the things that we're thinking about. And then vice versa. Like, it's not like I don't have any perspective to share on lyrics or music. And it's not like folks on the inside don't have, really insightful things to share about politics. And so it becomes very generative by bringing people together from different walks of life, as opposed to just self-selecting people who already share the same politics. And I think that's extended to certain conversations that Noam can speak to more about, race and anti-racism, where, we've had also conversations with folks inside about like our understanding of Black Lives Matter, their understanding of Black Lives Matter, et cetera. So with that, I will wrap up. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for this opportunity to share. Would love questions or suggestions about how I'm presenting this and how I'm kind of drawing conclusions. And definitely stay tuned for the album. And then, hopefully this presentation will become an article or a book chapter that will be out in like 4 to 7 years. Any comments, questions? Do you want me to keep recording or stop recording?
That's up to you. Completely
All
up
right,
to
I'll
you.
I'll keep it recording. So then if there's anything I want to come back to later. But yeah, thanks again for the opportunity. Thanks for the chance to share about this work. And if you do have any feedback, I'd welcome it. And if you want me to stop recording for you to give that feedback, I will stop recording.
I have feedback.
I would love to hear it.
No,
Thank you, Al.
number one, I absolutely love the reciprocity that all of this brings. That back and forth, because I think it is such an important topic. I'm also wondering if you are at all in the women's prisons.
We
Because
haven't been able to.
okay,
Every so often we'll hear from someone in the women's jail and, we'll say, like, I've written so many postcards being like, please give our information out, like, let's connect to people. But we haven't. And so the one woman who is on our album, or there's two women on our album. One is a trans woman who was incarcerated in the men's prison, and the other is a cis woman who we connected to through other organizers,
hmm
and she's already on the outside. So yeah, the group that we're working with is very heavily cis male.
because for me it's like the complete opposite. So what I'm hearing from some of the language that's being used are not at all what I get from the women. I work with both men and women, but mostly at this time, mostly females. And the we were pretty much told right from the beginning that we were going to be policed, and that it was very important that we didn't offend anybody from the DOC, or permission for us to perform and to be able to have rehearsals inside. I was able to have a keyboard in my cell. I mean, like things that they really, really made available for us to use to be able to take the time to process what a lot of women could not find the words to say. To mention that the medical neglect is just it's beyond comprehension of what happens with the medical neglect. I had a girl next door to me that had gone in with a stomach ache, and she was pregnant, like very pregnant, and they called her a liar. And she says, "I swear I'm going into labor." And she went back into the cell next to me and had her baby in the toilet. So like there are so many things that go on, and the problem is they're ugly, hard conversations. And they are so important to have because the people that need to hear them are the ones that are making the decisions. And that's what scares me. Is those are the people that need to know. And anybody that's spent any time healing at all, I know for myself that the only way through it is through that fire. Like you said, Nicole. Nick, you can't run away because if you, like you said, you run away, the album never gets made. And it's the same thing for some of the projects that we do. The people don't want to dive in. They don't want to talk about it. They want to. I have guys that come in from the outside and they're giving me pool shots with girls doing twerking, and it doesn't bring about awareness. I can't put that on in a social justice show. But at the same time, I don't want to limit somebody from being creative. So it's that juggle of how it's all going to balance out for this. At the same time, do I do two records? Do I just do links for that stuff? There's a lot of obstacles. I had one more question. I hope I'm not taking up too much of your time.
No, thank you so much.
It was you had all of these problems that you were addressing, right? That you had them listed beautifully. Different things that had that you explained were bridges that you needed to accomplish. Where is the place where the music heals that and fixes some of those problems?
That's a great question. And I think for my own research,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm going to answer that in a clear or comprehensive way. I think I'll probably refer to the research of so many other people, including people in Imagine, um, because what I am finding is kind of filling up my own, notebooks is just the process of collaboration. And so it wouldn't have to be music. I mean, the advantage of music in this case is that it is very labor intensive. So we, really have had to work with each other for a long time. It's not as easy as just like something that's a one-off. But yeah, I think that is an important question, and it's not one I want to dismiss, but I also am not sure if it's the question I'm going to be able to answer. And some of that is also because of what's bringing people on the inside to the project, which is they're hoping to get famous and make money, which we have been very clear we cannot guarantee that. Like we are not, a proper album. or recording label, but we are going to do our best to promote it and to get it out there. And in many cases, we've been able to get folks registered for ASCAP, so now they,
That's
have
great.
that, and like it's steps toward their hopeful like long-term career. Um, I think the other thing though, and this is anecdotal, is just that most of the people that I've spoken to talk about the way that writing and performing music is part of their own healing process. And so I think that the healing is happening, but it's not necessarily the focus of my research. And that, yeah, I have to think about why that is and what are the consequences of kind of saying like the music is less important than
Well,
the
I agree about the healing because I don't like to be limited with what I say, and I have songs that I'm part of a production company that works at Trinity College in Connecticut, and I know there's songs I can't bring to them that just happen to come
Mm.
out, and I end up using them in some other way, shape, or form. I know when it comes to grant writing and grant answering, they always want to know how I'm going to solve what my project is and
Yeah.
what my project is going to prove. So that was, I was not trying to like put you up against the wall or throw you under the
Oh,
bus. It's just a question that I have asked to me a lot is like, what, if we fund you, how are we going to solve some of the problems that you're questioning and that you're approaching and that you're really doing this research about? Let's not sit in the blah blah. How are we going to move it into action? And
yeah.
obviously making the record is doing that.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I really appreciate you bringing that up because one thing that we may have to do is write some grants to get the project through its final stage. I've written a couple grants that didn't require the framing of, this is healing, but I have done some writing before, mostly actually when trying to support Gary, our executive producer, in getting uh, released for medical care. In that situation, I talked about the, healing benefits and the rehabilitative benefits of the music project because that was what would resonate with those uh, readers. And so thank you for that reminder because for me, the most important thing is how can we build organizations that can end prisons, but that may not be what the grant writers are most interested in. And so, yeah, thanks for that reminder of the importance of stressing that. And it really is, I mean, it's really powerful. And Noam, I'm sure could elaborate, but like talking to folks about the role that their music has played in their own um, process of surviving incarceration is really moving. So, yeah, thank you, Elle. I don't feel thrown against the wall or thrown under the bus at all. It's like a really, really important reminder to keep that in mind when I talk about this research and when I think about where the research is going. Um,
My mother, when I thought things couldn't get any worse and I had hit my bottom, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and was dead within 9 months.
oh my God.
And I had written a song called How Do I Say Goodbye? And if I didn't get to do that song and perform that song, and I've played it I can't even tell you how many times I've gotten to perform it since. It was such a beautiful gift that I was allowed to do in there that I don't know what I would have done with
Mm.
all of that pain because she was my last cheerleader. She was the one who believed in me the most, and yeah, just when you think things can't get worse. So I know that for myself, I had an obligation when I came out to be able to offer people the same.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, one of the things that I thought was extraordinary about the stories that you were telling was this very idea of really the process, and that's even an oversimplification, honestly. It's walking through that door of pain, really, right? On both sides of it, the inside and the outside of it. And the paradox for me is that there is a product at the end of this. It's almost like the product drives what is the catalyst for it, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's not that important. The actual product is not as important as what it took to get it there. But it's, so I don't know if you feel like that's a fair assessment of what part of your story was in creating this project.
I think that for the purposes of this particular aspect of the research, and I'm planning on 3 chapters of the book being about the album and looking at it from all these different angles. So, but for this, definitely the process is more important than the product. I also feel like because for so many of the artists, the product is really, really important. I always want to like remember that it really matters to them to have their music out there. And so like right now we're getting into that stage of the whole focus is how do we promote, how do we get it out there? And even if that is not like, I don't have a research goal in creating TikTok videos, but I'm trying to learn how to create TikTok videos because we need to get their music out there. So that's also part, I think, of the reciprocity for myself as a researcher. I have benefited so much from being able to be, involved in this artistic dialogue. And so now, like, I need to make sure that the product gets attention. But in my own like set of questions, the thing I'm so excited about is to like be able to play this album when I'm driving. It's a really good album. I'm really excited about it. Um, and I think the other thing about the kind of like product process, oh gosh, what was it? Oh, the the album itself, there's a lot of songs that have lyrics that I don't love. There's definitely like non-feminist to anti-feminist, lyrics. And that's an interesting thing to sit with is that, in the end, this product is complex and it's not like we created a perfect abolitionist album. And I also think that's something that I value. And I think in general, I want to explore more when it comes to abolitionist scholarship and abolitionist organizing, is like, how do we make the perfect the enemy of the good? Because sometimes organizing can get so kind of fraught with people trying to be politically perfect, trying to always be, anti-oppressive in all the right ways and say all the right things that actually no work against like the systemic problems that we face can get accomplished. So I kind of love the fact that there's lines I do not like in the album, and that's okay. It's more for me to think about and potentially talk about, and agree to disagree with artists who have views that are different from my own.
Well, I'm going to tell you, you gave them all purpose because when I was in there, that is all I thought about were their performances. So, Nikki and Noam, you have really, if I am promising you that this is their total focus of what they're living for. And most of all, it gave us hope and it gave me hope inside, and that's what you're allowing these people to have, and it is such a gift. um, just to get a card in the mail is huge, and you're offering this way of expression of something from their insides of what they felt like without any expectations, and something to look forward to, and that's something so few people have when they're inside. So thank
I
you for
hope so.
doing this, really, thank you.
Thank you. And if everyone can just like hold J4 in your thoughts, because we actually have not been able to get in touch with him for quite a while. And, email every few weeks, tell him when to call and make sure that like my phone is on. And yeah, we don't know what's going on with him. So
He's probably in
um
segregation if you haven't been able to do
yeah,
that.
he is, but we heard he could call on the 1st and the 15th of the month, and it's been a couple months where we haven't heard from him. So just yeah, keep him in your thoughts. We'll keep trying to connect with him. Noam, is there anything that you want to add? Anything, especially anything that I kind of misrepresented or, but yeah, just anything you want to add from your experience?
Um, I don't think you misrepresented anything, Nikki. And
Thank
um,
you.
and it has been just like, I mean, as you all can imagine, like it's been an absolute pleasure to do this project together with Nikki, like a super incredible learning opportunity for me because um I, I probably would have folded, on certain of these issues, but you gave that, Nikki gave that the example of having these conversations. So for example, for Jay Ford's track, the conversation was, A, do we keep the track in there? Do we change the lyrics? Or, and what we landed on, I think, is the best, example of this idea of, we can't ignore that there are problems out there or disagreements out there, but what we can do is we can talk and we can try to have dialogue, and we can like have that brave space kind of thing. So having the track as is and then having an excerpt, a 1 or 2 minute excerpt of Nikki and J4 having a conversation, not their entire conversation, but, edited down to kind of get the meat of it, um, or the crux of it, I think was like the best thing. And then the other thing too is something I hadn't even remembered until we were just mentioning it just now was way, way back in the beginning when someone named Stevens, who was submitting a lot of poetry, um, and I think we're at the very, very start, we're saying this is what we want this album to be. These songs should be, trying to focus around this, this, and this. And Stevens like fired back right away and was like, you cannot do that to artists and you can't do that to us. You gotta, we have our own self-expression. Don't tell us, give us parameters. We have enough parameters in here. And I think that really changed the trajectory and opened up this idea like, all right, we're going to give some idea. We're not, like no anti-racism and nonsense. We did give some of the parameters, but I think that we did kind of open it up based on that feedback. And
Oh, thank you for that. I forgot about that, and that's so important. Thanks, Noah.
You gave him some
Um,
control back. It's wonderful.
Yeah, agency in a situation where there is no agency.
well, thank you all so much for being here. It really means a lot to be able to share this work, especially with folks that I've been in dialogue with through Imagine for a while. And yeah, very grateful and also want to respect the time that we're at, the fact that we're at the hour. So yeah, till next time.
Nikki, thank you so much. You did an absolutely beautiful job. The slides were great. I hope like I
Thank
said,
you.
I didn't throw you under the bus. I'm just trying to
No,
come in
so
like from
helpful.
someone who has worn those shoes. And I'm like fighting back the tears because I'm trying to be the professional host here because I'm going to cry when I get off the phone because knowing that there's people out there that do care, that haven't worn the shoes but are willing to walk through that darkness, it's what keeps me going doing the things I do. So thank you so much. And thank you for coming tonight and doing the beautiful, beautiful work. Noam and Nikki, thank you. Paige, thank you for sitting in. I know that you had a busy day and you have a choral going on
There's nothing.
behind you,
Yeah,
but
I'm just so in awe of
thank
your
you.
work and all of your journeys, and it's a humbling experience to be be here. So thank you, Nikki.
Well,
Fabulous, really great. No, I'm just
thank you.
it's and so enamored with your work. It's truly moving.
You guys know how to
Thanks.
find me if you need any music or you need any collaboration. I'm here and ready to work. So
Yes.
I just want to add
thank you.
one thing too, and I know we're at the hour just about, but working on this album together with you for the last, more than 2 years now, and then I know we've talked about pretty much most of these things or all of these things, but hearing this presentation of the album that we've been working on framed in this way was really meaningful and very helpful too,
Oh, cool.
So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. And yeah, hopefully, I think in the spring we want to bring the album. This was supposed to be the album release presentation, but we're not there. So I just did this research presentation, but yeah, hopefully in the spring we can bring the album to Imagine. So
We're looking forward to the encore of your
Absolutely.
presentation.